At exactly 3:15 a.m. on November 13th, 1974, a quiet suburban house in Amityville, Long Island, became the site of one of the most disturbing crimes ever recorded in the United States. Ronald DeFeo Jr. walked through the house with a rifle, shooting his parents and 4 siblings while they slept. In a matter of minutes, his entire family was dead. What makes the case even harder to understand is that no neighbors reported hearing gunfire. Even stranger, none of the victims appeared to wake up or try to escape. Every body was discovered lying face down, as if something had kept them completely still. Just weeks later, a new family moved into the house and fled only 28 days afterward, claiming the home was controlled by a dark presence. Over time, the story grew into a legend. Books were written, movies were made, countless theories followed. Now, more than 50 years later, new information has surfaced, and it challenges almost everything people think they know. Many involved seem unwilling to speak about it. Forget the version you've heard before. This story is unsettling. Stay with us as we break down what really happened.
When we went into the house that day, we didn't realize that it was diabolically infested. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I would have to say that Amityville was a 10. I want to make it clear at the beginning of this program that Lorraine and I do not back up the movie or the book. It was much more horrific than either.
The inhuman, the diabolical, are attracted to where tragedies occur, just like a moth would be attracted to a light. And when the Lutz family moved in 13 months after these murders, they were still using some of the furniture that was in there.
Is probably one of the most haunted homes in the world. It's certainly one of the most publicized haunted homes in the world.
Whatever happened, it was a confluence of events and personalities, and it meshed to form the perfect psychic storm.
Amityville was the kind of Long Island town where life moved slowly. Tree-lined streets, small diners, and families who had lived there for generations gave it a peaceful feel. Near the center of town stood a large Dutch colonial house at 112 Ocean Avenue. After November 13th, 1974, that address would become infamous. Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. was 23 years old and lived in the 2.5-story home with his parents and 4 younger siblings. From the outside, the DeFeos appeared to be a typical working-class Italian-American family. Ronald DeFeo Sr. managed a car dealership. Louise DeFeo stayed home and raised the children. But behind closed doors, the household was tense. Ronald Jr. had a reputation for being unstable. Neighbors and friends described him as angry, unpredictable, and increasingly out of control. He used drugs heavily, including heroin, LSD, and amphetamines. His relationship with his father was especially hostile. Arguments were common, and some turned violent. Years later, people close to the family would say they were surprised it hadn't ended sooner. What stands out most about that night is not only the violence, but how calmly it unfolded. Around 3 a.m., Ronald Jr. picked up a .35 caliber Marlin rifle, a hunting gun known for being extremely loud, and moved through the house without waking anyone. He entered his parents' bedroom first. Both were asleep when he fired 2 shots into each of them. His father, 43-year-old Ronald Sr., was hit in the back and neck. Louise, 42, was shot twice, including 1 round that tore through her lungs. There was blood throughout the room, but no signs of resistance. They never woke up. He then went to the bedroom shared by his younger brothers. John Matthew, age 9, and Mark, age 11, were each shot once in the back. Again, There was no evidence they moved or tried to escape. From there, he entered the room of his sister Allison, who was 13. One shot to the head killed her instantly. Finally, he climbed to the top floor, where his oldest sister Dawn, 18, was sleeping. She was shot once in the head. All 6 victims were found face down in their beds. None attempted to flee. None appeared to fight back. The way their bodies were positioned was disturbingly similar. Later forensic analysis showed the shootings happened within about 15 minutes. 9 shots were fired from a rifle known for its thunderous noise. Yet no one inside or outside the house reported hearing gunfire. The only sound anyone recalled was the family dog barking. How this happened remains unexplained. One theory suggests the victims were drugged, but toxicology tests found no sedatives in their systems. Another idea points to more than one shooter. Others believe the killings happened so fast that no one had time to react. Still, none of these explanations fully account for the lack of movement, panic, or defensive injuries. Later that same day, around 6:30 p.m., Ronald Jr. walked into Henry's bar nearby and shouted, "You've got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot." Several people followed him back to the house. When they entered, they found a horrifying scene. Police were called immediately, and the home quickly filled with investigators. At first, Ronald Jr. acted like a devastated son. He claimed the murders were carried out by a mob hitman named Luis Fellini. He said he hadn't been home the night before and blamed an argument over his mother's cooking for why he stayed at a friend's place. But as detectives looked closer, his story began to fall apart. Officers noticed how controlled and practiced his behavior seemed. After roughly 12 hours of questioning, he confessed. "Once I started," he reportedly said, "I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." He admitted to killing his family and pointed to years of physical and emotional abuse from his father. He also spoke bitterly about his siblings, calling them leeches and pigs. Even so, his account never stayed consistent. Sometimes he said he acted alone. Other times, he claimed his sister Dawn was involved. In another version, he said voices told him to do it. Even in confession, the full truth remained unclear. Whatever the full story may be, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was formally charged with 6 counts of second-degree murder. At trial, his defense team tried to argue insanity. Psychiatrists testified that he had antisocial personality disorder, but the jury rejected his claims. He was convicted and given 6 life sentences to be served back-to-back. DeFeo remained in prison until his death in 2021. Yet the case didn't end there. In many ways, it was only the beginning. Just 13 months later, another family moved into the DeFeo home. Less than 4 weeks after arriving, they fled in fear, leaving nearly everything behind. What followed became one of the most talked-about paranormal stories in American history. And now, with new details coming forward, the reality behind it all may finally be coming into focus. The haunting that stunned the public. In December 1975, 13 months after the DeFeo murders, the Lutz family purchased the house at 112 Ocean Avenue. George and Kathy Lutz moved in with Kathy's 3 children from a previous marriage. They paid $80,000 for the property, an unusually low price for a 5-bedroom, 3-bath waterfront home on Long Island's South Shore. They were aware of the murders. The real estate agent disclosed the history, and the couple even talked it over during dinner. Still, George and Kathy didn't consider themselves superstitious. They believed the house represented a chance to start over. According to the family, strange events began almost immediately. Within hours of moving in, their dog Harry, who was chained in the backyard, tried to jump the fence and nearly strangled himself. George managed to free him just in time. Then there were the smells. Strong, unexplained odors appeared in different rooms and disappeared without warning. Doors creaked on their own. Cold areas formed in rooms that should have been warm. And then came the sounds. A family friend suggested having the house blessed, and George agreed. A Catholic priest, Father Ray Peccaro, arrived to perform the blessing. But George later claimed the ritual went wrong. While sprinkling holy water in what had been Don DeFeo's former bedroom, the priest allegedly heard a deep, unseen voice ordering him to get out. George said the priest felt a force strike him across the face and rushed out of the room. In the days afterward, the priest reportedly developed painful blisters on his hands. However, Father Peccaro later stated under oath that he never entered the house at all and had only spoken to George over the phone. This was one of many conflicting accounts that made the story harder to untangle. Soon, Kathy began feeling what she described as a presence. She said it felt like a woman who sometimes wrapped her arms around her from behind, almost in a comforting way. At first, the house didn't feel threatening, just aware. Their daughter Missy then spoke of an imaginary friend named Jody. She described Jody as a pig with glowing red eyes who appeared outside her bedroom window and told her the family would never leave. George and Kathy later claimed they both saw red eyes staring at them from the yard on a snowy December night. George ran outside but found no one there. What he did see were hoof-shaped footprints in the snow. At some point, George said he discovered a hidden room in the basement, one that did not appear on any blueprints. The room was small, had dark red walls, and smelled so bad it made him sick. He insisted it hadn't existed before. As time passed, George felt the house was focusing on him. He began waking up every night at exactly 3:15 a.m., the time when the DeFeo murders were believed to have occurred. Even with the heat on, he felt constantly cold. His mood changed. He stopped shaving, became fixated on keeping the fireplace burning, and neglected basic hygiene. His relationship with Kathy grew strained. He believed something inside the house was trying to control him. The children began sleeping face down, mirroring how the DeFeo victims had been found. Black mold spread over their possessions. Green slime leaked from the walls. Doors slammed on their own. Windows stuck open or shut. The stair banister tore loose, and kitchen cabinets were ripped off their hinges. One night, George claimed he was thrown from the bed by an unseen force. He said he watched helplessly as Kathy rose off the mattress. Her face briefly changed into that of an old, shriveled woman before returning to normal. Kathy later said she remembered nothing. What happened on their final night in the house has never been fully explained. George and Kathy refused to share every detail. Whatever they experienced was enough to make them leave immediately. They abandoned their clothes, furniture, food, and even George's custom motorcycle. They never went back. Their account became the basis for Jay Anson's 1977 book, The Amityville Horror. The book sold millions of copies and led to countless films and documentaries. The story spread worldwide, frightening audiences everywhere. Still, many people were skeptical. Inconsistencies, exaggerated claims, and the absence of solid physical proof raised serious doubts. Over time, more questions surfaced. Had the Lutz family truly experienced something supernatural? Or had they created the most famous paranormal hoax of the last century? For a period, the Lutz account seemed convincing. They had fled the home, refused to move back in, and passed lie detector tests about their experiences. Jay Anson's book painted them as an ordinary family overwhelmed by something beyond their control. But as the story gained attention, reporters, skeptics, and investigators began taking a closer look. What they uncovered started to weaken the foundation of the Amityville legend. The first and most damaging contradiction involved Father Ray Pecoraro, the priest who was said to have been slapped by an unseen force and ordered to leave the house by a threatening voice. In early interviews included in the Anson book, George Lutz claimed the priest had personally visited 112 Ocean Avenue to bless the home. Years later, under legal pressure, Father Pecoraro submitted a sworn statement saying he had never entered the house at all. He explained that he had only spoken to George over the phone. There was no visit, no slap, no strange voice, and no physical reaction, just a phone conversation. Then there was the story of Jody, the pig with glowing red eyes. George and Kathy said they saw the creature staring through the windows and later found hoof prints in the snow outside. But weather records from that night showed there had been no snowfall in Amityville. No snow meant no tracks, which cast serious doubt on the entire story. The Red Room was described as a hidden basement space with deep red walls and a foul smell. Something George said wasn't listed on the house plans. It sounded frightening. But when the next family moved in, they located the room without any difficulty. It turned out to be a small storage space under the stairs. It was simply a painted closet. The reports of physical destruction also didn't hold up. The Lutzes said the front door had been ripped off its hinges, the staircase banister torn loose, and a heavy window had slammed shut and injured their child's fingers. But the next owners, Jim and Barbara Cromartie, who bought the house shortly after the Lutz family left, said the home was in excellent condition. The door was intact, the banister was secure, and the windows worked normally. That led to an obvious question. If violent forces had caused that level of damage, how did the house appear completely repaired by the time the next family arrived? As journalists began to compare statements, skeptics looked even closer. One of the most explosive claims came from William Weber, the defense attorney for Ronald DeFeo Jr. Weber admitted that he met with the Lutzes soon after they left the house. According to him, they discussed ways to make money from the DeFeo murders. In one interview, he bluntly stated, "We created this horror story over many bottles of wine." That comment changed public perception. What had been viewed as a terrifying ordeal now looked, to many, like a business plan. Even so, the Lutzes never backed down. They maintained that their experiences were real. George, in particular, refused to change his account when accused of inventing the story for profit. He pointed out that the money they made from the book and movie was limited when compared to how famous the story became. "If we were in it for money," he once said, "we failed." Still, more inconsistencies kept coming. In early interviews, the Lutzes talked about green slime dripping from the walls, yet no photographs or physical proof ever surfaced. Later film versions showed black sludge, flying demons, and extreme scenes that were never part of the original claims. The window incident was also questioned. The Lutzes said a window shut on its own and crushed their son's fingers. The Cromarties reported that all windows were sturdy and undamaged, with no signs of malfunction. Later assessments suggested the incident could have been caused by a faulty counterweight, or may not have happened at all. One of the most famous pieces of supposed evidence was a photograph taken during a psychic investigation. It appeared to show a young boy with glowing eyes peering from a doorway. Some claimed it was the ghost of one of the DeFeo children. Others argued it was simply a living child or crew member, with light reflecting off his glasses. The image has never been proven to show anything paranormal. Even Ed and Lorraine Warren, the paranormal investigators who supported the haunting claims, came under criticism. Detractors noted that many of their most well-known cases including Amityville, the Perron family case that inspired The Conjuring, and the Enfield poltergeist, shared the same pattern: frightened families, dramatic stories, and very little solid proof. By the early 1980s, the Amityville story was in serious trouble. Lawsuits followed. Skeptics released books challenging the claims. Media outlets began calling the entire thing a hoax. And yet, questions remained. Why would a family leave their home so suddenly, abandon their belongings, and never return if nothing had happened? Were they overwhelmed by fear after living in a house tied to a mass murder? Did they experience events they couldn't explain? Or was the entire story, from the priest's encounter to the pig and levitations, carefully crafted to sell books? Around that same time, another idea started gaining attention. This line of thought focused less on ghosts and more on a possible human plot driven by resentment, anger, and long-standing conflict. It challenged what people believed about the DeFeo murders themselves. What if Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. had help? Over the years, Butch told several different versions of what happened. In one account, he said drugs caused him to lose control. In another, he claimed voices led him to commit the murders, a claim later used in the film adaptation. But in later prison interviews, his story changed again. He began saying that his sister Dawn was involved. According to Butch, the original plan was only to kill their parents. He claimed both he and Dawn were worn down by years of abuse from their father, verbal, physical, and controlling behavior that their mother allowed to continue. In his retelling, he and Dawn were united against their parents. He said that on the night of November 13th, after watching the war movie Castle Keep in the basement, they agreed to act. He admitted to shooting their parents, but while he was in another part of the house, he claimed Dawn picked up the rifle and killed their younger siblings. When he discovered this, he said he became furious and shot Dawn in the head. The story sounds designed to shift blame, but certain details raised questions. Dawn's autopsy showed unburned gunpowder on her nightgown, which can suggest she fired a weapon. There were no signs of a struggle in her room, and the bullet path didn't perfectly match the others. That led some to ask whether she was awake and involved. Another theory focuses on the family environment itself. Some criminologists believe the DeFeo children lived under extreme control and emotional pressure, especially Butch. Years of abuse, manipulation, and drug use may have created a situation that was bound to end violently. When it finally happened, it wasn't sudden. It had been building for years. This has led some psychologists to question whether the events reported by the Lutzes were shaped by trauma rather than spirits. Homes connected to extreme violence can trigger intense psychological responses in new residents, especially those already under stress. The house may not have been haunted by ghosts, but by the emotional weight of what happened there. And those contradictions didn't stop with the murders. They carried into the haunting claims, into the book, into the films, and into the story that still surrounds Amityville today. As the Lutz family's story began to fall apart under closer examination, focus slowly returned to the real event that started everything: the 1974 murder of the DeFeo family. What people found was not a story about spirits, but something far more disturbing and very human. A mix of secrecy, betrayal, and a family truth that may never have been fully told. Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. was found guilty of killing his entire family, but his explanation changed many times. At first, he said voices forced him to do it. Later, he claimed drugs had clouded his mind. But years into his prison sentence, he introduced a new version that shocked many people. He said his sister Dawn was involved. According to Butch, the original plan was only to kill their parents, whom he described as abusive. He claimed that after he left the room, Dawn killed their younger siblings on her own. He said her actions were sudden and unplanned. When he discovered what she had done, he claimed he shot her in anger. As extreme as this story sounds, a few details made investigators pause. Dawn's body reportedly had gunpowder residue that was not burned, which could suggest she fired a gun. Her injuries were also slightly different from the rest of the family. So the question remains, did Dawn play a role in the killings, or was Butch changing his story to reduce his own blame? Butch didn't stop with that version. In other accounts, he claimed two friends were inside the house that night. He spoke about possible mafia ties and said his grandfather warned him to stay quiet and let the family deal with the situation. There were long-standing rumors that the DeFeo family had links to organized crime. Some believe this could explain why neighbors heard little and why the crime scene appeared controlled and unusually orderly. This leads to an uncomfortable question. Was the case pushed through the legal system too quickly to keep certain matters hidden? There was also a strange remark made by Ronald DeFeo Sr. just months before the murders. After returning from Montreal with religious statues and a priest who was rumored to perform exorcisms, he reportedly said, "I've got a devil on my back." What he meant has never been clear. Was he talking about his son, his own past, or something he believed was tied to the house? No matter which version is true, the violence of that night left deep scars. It's possible the Lutz family, knowing the home's history, moved into a place already heavy with trauma. In such an environment, normal sounds and shadows can feel threatening, especially when fear is already present. Maybe there were no spirits at all. Maybe the house was never haunted. Or maybe it was, but not in the way people imagine. Perhaps places absorb pain. Perhaps homes remember what happened inside them. If walls could talk, what would yours say? Do you think a house can hold emotional energy, especially fear, violence, and grief? Share your thoughts below. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.